All right. Now that fall is here and everybody's harvesting everything, this is the really the time of year to start making mead. Mead is an old school alcoholic beverage, commonly associated with the Vikings and that kind of era. It's made primarily from honey, yeast, and fruit fermentation. Uh, Typically, the way there's so many recipes, just like with wine and beer, there's so many different recipes. Everybody does it differently, and every person who asks is going to have a different opinion. Um, the way I do mine, typically I'll do three different batches at a time. I'll do one with about 3 pounds of honey per gallon of water, one with about 5 pounds of honey, um, and one with about 7 pounds. That's typically what I find around in my area that people like the best. You can do it with 1 pound of honey per gallon of water, but it's going to be it's going to be pretty dry. Um, Mead itself is it's not beer and it's not wine, but the process to make it is similar to beer, and the way that I describe it to people is similar to wine. So, if you like a drier wine, you'll probably like a drier mead. If you like the sweeter, more sugary um, wines, you'll probably like a sweeter mead. So, the 7 pounds of honey per gallon of water, to me, when that's completely processed, tastes like kind of like apple juice the way I make it. It's very sweet. You don't really taste the alcohol at all until you're a couple drinks in and you're having a good time. So I like that one. One thing with mead though is that you absolutely cannot rush the process. Sometimes you can kind of speed things up a little bit with hops in making beer, but do not rush the mead process. It will not turn out good. Uh, you've got to let it ferment. You've got to give it time to sit, rack it over, let the yeast really do its job. Um, I flavor mine with a back flavor of, I typically do apples, super sweet apples, or pears. In my area, that's pretty common. I've got a lot of access, especially to the apple orchards. So I've got a lot of access to that, a lot of apples. It just works for me, which is why mine tastes a lot like apple juice. You can make it with, you can back flavor it with pretty much any fruit, or even berries. Strawberry is pretty good. The orange works pretty well. I've done that. But there's so many different things that you can do. So, with the yeast, when I first started making mead, I just bought regular store-bought bread making yeast, which does work. But the different kind of yeast that you get will also add a little bit of a different flavor and kind of affect the process a little bit differently because each yeast ferments at a different rate. Um, you can get specific wine making yeast from different companies, but it really just depends on what you have around you. You can do it with regular yeast. The wine yeast works a little bit better. It's a little smoother process in the end, but it doesn't really matter. So you can experiment, figure out what works best for you, and go from there. If you have any comments or questions about it, let me know. If you find things that don't work at all, let me know. If you find things that work better for you, let me know. With fermenting, a couple of tricks that I've learned is I just use balloons. Honestly, you can get the little bubblers that let air and CO2 out but not back in. It helps prevent microbes and contamination that way as well. But the balloons work just as well for me. I'll go to the store, and for the price of one of those bubblers, I can get a whole pack of balloons, a couple packs, and do a lot at one time. I make smaller batches. If you make the larger batches and you use the stainless steel vats and things, then it's a bigger process. And at that point, you're above the bubblers anyway because your equipment is so big. You can use the bubblers, they work just as well. But for me, the balloons work too. I set everything up, I make sure it's as clean and as sanitary as I can get it, and then I poke a hole in the top of the balloons, put the balloons over it as the CO2 emits and does its process. Then it inflates the balloon and the balloon pops up. It'll kind of inflate a little bit, but because there's a hole, it won't inflate all the way. And I know it's done when that balloon starts to deflate a little bit. Then I start my ending process and get it ready for racking and that kind of thing. Getting it ready for friends and family mostly. I do local things because you can't legally sell mead, especially not without an alcohol dealer's license or whatever they got. But as a small time person, you can gift up to 20 gallons. At least that's what it was. It may be different now, depending on when you're watching the video. But at this time, you could gift up to 20 gallons to friends and family. And if anybody wants to donate to you for that, that's one way you can do it. If they like it. And if not, if they want to say, give you some money to, if you do it with strawberries, and they would give you some money to try it with apples. That's, one way around it. But the balloons I like because it's a visual cue for me, and I'm a very visual person. So it's a little bit on making mead, different weights and volumes and things that you can use. If you want to, you can Google it or YouTube it. There's a bunch of different things that you can do. I will post my exact recipe here in a little bit when I actually go to make the mead. I'll show the whole process. So that's one thing to look forward to this fall.